What up, YouTube? This is Knowledge of Self-Determination. So I'm back with you guys for, again, remembrance of Black History. Not Black History Month, Black History every day. I agree with some brothers like the one LBZ who said that the whole Black History thing is a sham. But at the same time, I want to pay homage and respect to it, because if not for Carter G. Woodson, we probably wouldn't have any time set aside for remembrance of what our people have accomplished in this country, what we have contributed to this country. I honestly believe that our history, Black, African American history, Black history, should be a part of American history. You understand? I think it should be a part of American history, not just celebrated by only Black people and as a novelty for the school system in February. It should be an everyday thing. Whether it's intertwined with American history or not, it should be taught and learned every day, especially the Black people. But I'm going to continue reading from Booker T. Washington's book, Up From Slavery. This is Chapter 2, entitled Boyhood Days. After the coming of freedom, there were 2 points upon which practically all the people on our place were agreed, and I find that this was generally true throughout the South, that they must change their names, and that they must leave the old plantation for at least a few days or weeks in order that they might really feel sure that they were free. In some way, a feeling got among the colored people that it was far from proper for them to bear the surname of their former owners, and a great many of them took their surnames. This was one of the first signs of freedom. When they were slaves, a colored person was simply called John or Susan. There was seldom occasion for more than the use of one name. If John or Susan belonged to a white man by the name of Hatcher, sometimes he was called John Hatcher, or as often Hatcher's John. But there was a feeling that John Hatcher or Hatcher's John was not the proper title by which to denote a free man, and so in many cases John Hatcher was changed to John S. Lincoln or John S. Sherman, the initial S standing for no name, it being simply a part of what the colored man proudly called his entitles. As I have stated, most of the colored people left the old plantation for a short while at least, so as to be sure, it seemed, that they could leave and try their freedom on to see how it felt. After they had remained away for a time, many of the older slaves especially returned to the old homes and made some kind of contract with their former owners by which they remained on the estate. So that was a big time in our history when emancipation came, and so many of our people didn't even we had our names taken from us, so our original names were lost to us. This is hundreds of years after we've been in this country. Our original names were lost to us. We weren't allowed to speak in our native tongues. We weren't allowed to call ourselves by our native names, or even name our children after our native names and homelands. We had to name, the children had to be named after European-esque type names. And now with this newfound freedom, they felt obliged to, basically give themselves names, and I really can't be mad at them for that. But I also find it profound how some of the older slaves came back. How some of the older Africans came back to the plantations and signed and made contracts or deals with their former masters in order to stay on the estate and probably continue to work for them, probably for some ridiculously small wage, but they couldn't force them to be slaves anymore, so they didn't have to work for free. I'll continue on. My second difficulty with regard to my name, or rather a name, from the time when I could remember anything, I had always been called simply Booker. Before going to school, it had never occurred to me that it was needful or appropriate to have an additional name. When I heard the school roll call, I noticed that all the children had at least 2 names, and some of them indulged in what seemed to me the extravagance of having 3. I was in deep perplexity because I knew that the teacher would demand of me at least 2 names, and I had only 1. By the time the occasion came for the enrolling of my name, an idea occurred to me which I thought would make me equal to the situation. And so, when the teacher asked me what my full name was, I calmly told him Booker Washington, as if I had been called by that name all my life. And by that name I have since been known. Gee, sorry about that. Later in life, I found that my mother had given me the name of Booker Taliaferro soon after I was born, but in some way, that part of my name seemed to disappear, and for a long while was forgotten. But as soon as I found out about it, I revived it and made my full name Booker Taliaferro Washington. I think there are not many men in our country who have had the privilege of naming themselves in the way I have. So that's where the T in Booker T. Washington comes from. His mom had given him the name Booker Taliaferro at birth, but he named himself Washington. So that's a little bit of insight on how he got his name, where his name came from. Let's see. I'm skipping ahead because, like I said, I'm not going to read the whole book. I'm not going to, do that. But I am going to read certain passages that I have set aside because I think they're very interesting. See, in later years, I confess that I do not envy the white boys as I once did. I have learned that success is to be measured not so much by the position that one has reached in life as by the obstacles which he has overcome while trying to succeed. Looked at from this standpoint, I almost reached the conclusion that often the Negro boy's birth and connection with an unpopular race is an advantage. So far as real life is concerned, with few exceptions, the Negro youth must work harder and must perform his tasks even better than a white youth in order to secure recognition. But out of the hard and unusual struggle which he is compelled to pass, he gets a strength, a confidence that one misses, whose pathway is comparatively smooth by reason of birth and race. From any point of view, I had rather be what I am, a member of the Negro race, than be able to claim membership with the most favored of any other race. I have always been made sad when I have heard members of any race claiming rights and privileges or certain badges of distinction on the ground simply that they were members of this or that race, regardless of their own individual worth or attainments. I have been made to feel sad for such persons because I am cautious of the fact that mere connection with what is known as a superior race will not permanently carry an individual forward unless he has individual worth, and mere connection with what is regarded as an inferior race will not finally hold an individual back if he possesses intrinsic individual merit. Every persecuted individual and race should get much consolation out of the great human law, which is universal and eternal, that merit, no matter under what skin found, is in the long run recognized and rewarded. This I have said here, not to call attention to myself as an individual, but to the race to which I am proud to belong. Booker T. Washington was a great man, in my opinion. He did a lot for himself and for black people. There are some black people who would say that Booker T. Washington was a sellout because Booker T. Washington believed that that black people should not stand and fight against white people to be accepted, but instead we should build ourselves up, educate ourselves, if we have to be segregated in our own communities, so be it. Build ourselves up, work hard, create a system for ourselves. And then only after hard work and diligence will we get the respect of those who snub us, who turn their noses up at us, or who look down on us. Now, W.E.B. Du Bois didn't necessarily agree with that particular way of approaching life and empowerment for black people. He disagreed with that. And I don't know. I mean, it has merit. I believe. Instead of constantly yelling and screaming and trying to fight back, his thing was, more important was to be determined to educate ourselves, to educate our children, to work hard and build up our communities so that we can gain some pride within ourselves, first and foremost, before we cared about anybody respecting us. At least that's what I get from it. You know, some people may have a difference of opinion and they are entitled to that. So I'm just going to read this one last paragraph and then I'll continue this another day. In those days, and later as a young man, I used to try to picture in my imagination the feeling and ambitions of a white boy with absolutely no limits placed upon his aspirations and activities. I used to envy the white boy who had no obstacles placed in the way of his becoming a congressman, governor, bishop, or president by reason of the accident of his birth or race. I used to picture the way that I would act under such circumstances, how I would begin at the bottom and keep rising until I reach the highest round of success. So I'm going to end there with this one. And tomorrow or the day after, I'll be starting in on chapter 3 in the book, in Booker T. Washington's book, Up From Slavery. But I think this kind of information is important to our people to understand the struggle that a lot of the pathfinders, the trailblazers, the beacons of light in our communities have had to go through in order to get to the point where they are recognized hundreds of years later. If Booker T. Washington wasn't the man that he was, he would have disappeared into obscurity like so many other black African people did in those times. There's so many, that millions and millions of black people whose names are lost forever, you know. But it was the ones such as himself and people like Harriet Tubman and so on and so forth, you know, Denmark Vesey, Nat Turner, you know. Those people will live on in memory forever. And just one other thing also I want to add to this. I believe that black history, African American history, so far as it relates to the Africans that have been kidnapped from their homeland and brought to America, that our history is parallel to quote unquote American history. And I find it strange that America still continues to separate black people's history from American history, as if being American and being black are two things that are completely separate from each other. We're here. We're citizens of this country, so we're Americans. Our history deserves just as much recognition as quote unquote white history, because that's what they're saying without actually saying it. American history is white history. Because if it wasn't, it'd just be history, not black history in February and white history all the other 11 months of the year. History is history, period. It shouldn't have a color attached to it. But if it's going to have a color attached to it, then how about we get rid of the fucking month and just have black history every day? Because it deserves to be taught in school every day. Even if only the black kids. It deserves to be taught. It deserves recognition. Our people deserve recognition for what we have done and contributed to this country. We have done things that people of all races have benefited from, and we continue to. And to actually address Donald Trump and his panel of black advisors, which I'ma say right now, they don't speak for me. I don't give a fuck how black they think they are, and I don't give a fuck if they reverence. I don't care who they are. I don't care what religion you belong to. You don't speak for me if you selling us out to go chop it up with Donald Trump. You don't speak for me. There was no black caucus that elected you clowns to be at the forefront of speaking for the black community. You were chosen by a dude who was a bigot, misogynistic, xenophobic, racist scumbag. You were chosen by him to represent our people, which means that you cannot be trusted. Black History Month is whatever we call it, not whatever Donald Trump decides to rename it as. African American History Month. No, because like I heard the 1LBZ say on Ticket TV's video they did together. You don't hold any rights to that. You don't hold any rights to that, Donald Trump. And black history is more than just about what African Americans did. Marcus Garvey, Patrice Lumumba, so on. You know what I'm saying? Toussaint L'Ouverture. You know what I'm saying? These people weren't Americans. And they still need to be celebrated. Rastafari, you know what I'm saying? He was an African emperor. So you don't have the right to tell us what the celebration of our people should be named. Man, I'm gonna go ahead and end the video right there. But all of you black people who are allowing Trump to make this call for black people, all of you motherfuckers should be ashamed of yourself. And on top of that, all of you clowns who put yourselves up in the forefront, you self-righteous assholes who put yourselves in the forefront thinking that you are speaking for the black community, you know, you don't speak for us. You don't speak for me. I speak for myself. I have a fucking YouTube channel. I have a voice. I talk to people every day about this kind of stuff. Love it or like it. You can't stop it. So anyway, it's Knowledge of Self-Determination. Like, learn, and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow or over the weekend with more black history information. And peace.